Jeff Slauson here from 19 News Now at the 19 News Digital Desk. We are going to be bringing you live to a CMSD Board of Education meeting. This one incredibly important. So for those that are unfamiliar with this, essentially the school had submitted a 5-year plan 2 years ago to determine the future financial steps of the district. Now we are at a point where there is a massive deficit that they need to make up. So cuts are expected. What they're going to be doing in this meeting, which I'll show you live to right now, is breaking down what the plan is for these cuts and how they're anticipating to get around that. This is going to be testy. This is going to be a difficult conversation because you can expect that some pretty important things may be lost. You're seeing now they're about to do the Pledge of Allegiance. So once they do that, then we'll bring you live there. It's important to remember what is being done here, at least what's being discussed here as far as these cuts, are all things that, according to the district, will need to be done in order to basically make the district profitable, or at least at a point where they're not hemorrhaging or losing money. The teachers union has come out and said that they're hoping that there's not going to be any cuts on this. We will take you live now to this. This should be addressed within a couple of minutes, pretty early on.
Thank you. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The minutes are approved. Next, I'm pleased to introduce CEO Morgan to present this evening's CEO report.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Chair Ellicott, and we're happy to be here this month to present some very important information. But before we go into my specific presentation I'll be doing with Chief Stockdale, I just want to share some highlights of different things that are taking place, and then also invite the School of One up to do the School Spotlight. But first, I want to start by saying Happy Black History Month. Of course, as I've been sharing, Black history and a celebration of all of our cultures is every day and shouldn't just be limited to a month or a day, but really excited to celebrate this month. I've been seeing all of the great things that have been taking place in our schools, and we also have been doing some different things at the system to celebrate some of our employees and also celebrate some of our schools that are celebrating during this time. So happy Black History Month to everyone. Also, as I'm on this side of the school year, before the school year, there were so many school visits that I had done. I'd done about 40 school visits prior to the break, and now picking those back up where I'm in schools at least once a week or every other week, and now in 52 of our schools I've been doing school visits, and so been so great to go into our buildings. Our school leaders, our teachers have been welcoming us as they've been coming in, and it's been great to see some of the great instruction that was taking place. I know when I was at Dyke School of the Arts, I got a preview of their Black History program, both from their dance and their music students, so really excited to see all of that work that is taking place. Also, finally, before I bring up our principal from the School of One to do our school spotlight, I know that last month was our board member recognition month, and so we did recognize our board members all month and thank them. I know at our last meeting we had a presentation that we shared in a video that members all across our district celebrated our board members, but our Ohio School Board Association also wanted to share a recognition for each of our board members, thanking them for their leadership and their work that they have done. So I have a certificate for each of you that I'll make sure I give to you before the evening is over from the Ohio School Board Association, thanking you for your leadership and the hard work you do. I know I couldn't do this work without you, and I know our system could not do this work without you, so thank you. With that said, at this point, I would love to bring our principal, Ms. Sims of the School of One, up to share this month's first school spotlight.
All right, good evening all. Happy Black History Month to everyone. I would first like to thank the board members for your time and service, to our CMSD staff, our families, our communities. Dr. Morgan, thank you for the opportunity to present this evening. And a special thank you to my School of One family. Yeah. A small group of committed, thoughtful individuals and educators who are changing the world one student at a time. My name is Miriam Sims, and I'm honored to be serving in my 8th year as the principal of the School of One. I am grateful to have this opportunity to share information about our school and the work that my staff and students do every day. All right, so this evening I'm going to tell you a little bit about who we are. We're going to focus on our school data, discuss our AAP focus areas, share our partners in education, talk about our bright spots and highlights, and share out a few focus and celebration areas. All right, the doors to the School of One opened approximately 12 years ago by my predecessor and the founding principal, Ms. Maroque, and was founded on the principle that all students can learn and be successful when provided with the right supports and structure. Our students come to us at many different places in their educational lives, with different school and life experiences, various grade levels, and for many different reasons. Here's a few real-life examples of our students that we served. An overage 10th grader who failed the first 2 years of high school because their family was homeless and they moved around a lot. An on-track 11th grader who wanted a smaller school environment because they had difficulty adjusting to traditional school environment due to social rejection and negative academic experiences. And last, a 12th grader and parent who needed a flexible school schedule that could work, where they could work and take care of their families. What makes us unique is that we meet students where they are, and we take them where they need to be. And the B is our mission statement. As you see right here, if you look up, our mission is to produce successful graduates by offering students a differentiated, individualized, digital, online educational experience embedded with both the academic and social and emotional services needed to be ready for the 21st century. All right, so I want to tell you a little bit about our sites. So we have 9 sites, okay? We have 4 East Side and 4 West Side sites. 4 of the sites are located in the community. The School of One at City Life, LGBT Center, Magnet Manufacturing, and MCPC STAD. These 4 sites offer students a unique high school experience and environment, direct connection to community experiences and resources that you will learn a little bit about later on. All of our sites offer our students an online blended learning school structure that is 90% online and 10% blended learning. In addition, our team collaborates with students on the creation of an individualized educational plan that is tailored around their needs and interests. For example, if a student comes to us and wants to be a nurse, not only do our teacher provide them with courses that will help deepen their comprehension in the science field, but they try to pair them up with partners in our community that can provide internships and job shadowing so they can get a firsthand experience. In addition to that, they do weekly goal meetings to make sure our students are held accountable and focus on their goals as they go through the weekly. We have wraparound services that focuses on developing the whole being that are provided by our resource coordinators and our Say Yes specialists. Lastly, we offer field experiences that provide our students with exposure to things outside of their neighborhoods. All right, our next slide, we're going to talk about our demographics. So we have approximately 281 students. This number is always changing, literally every day. We have ongoing enrollment and 3 graduations a year. As soon as a student finishes, we graduate them out so that they can enter the workforce or go to college, depending on the time of the year. We have 28 staff members. Our student enrollment, as you see, all the information here. As far as our students with ELL, they represent 8% of our population. Our SPED population is about 15%, Gifted is about 5%, and our transiency rate is about 25.2%. Our student body consists of approximately 58% Black, 23% Hispanic, and 17% white. Our staff body ethnicity consists of 41% Black, 52% white, and less than 3% Asian and Palestinian. All right, so now we're going to talk a little bit about our OST data. So if you take a look up here, you'll see we have two charts. One chart is going to focus on showing you our performance in all subject areas from algebra to geometry. And then the other chart is going to show you kind of where our students actually failed at based on their level of understanding, from limited to accomplished. So the School of One has always been very consistent in making growth on ELA, OST. But in the past, we noticed that the other subject areas we didn't do very well on. And algebra was one of them. Algebra is the one that students really need to make competency on in order to meet graduation requirements. So my small group of thoughtful and committed individuals came together. We started working on developing lessons together. So weekly, you'll see us doing lessons, our staff members teaching each other, and then those lessons are taken back to the school and implemented in small group sessions for our students. So if you look at the chart, last year we did algebra. And if you see, we made a 3% gain. And we didn't do so bad in ELA either. We still move, but we want to keep moving and even moving higher. Moving forward, we will put more focus on all areas by embedding reading and writing strategies throughout the curriculum. All right, the next slide, you'll see how we compare to the district and the state. So if you take a look, you'll see that the School of One is in red, and in our American government, our ELA 2, and our Algebra 1, we did very well. We did higher than the district. And that's pretty much continuous. Every year you'll see that growth. All right, this is our conditions for learning. This really focuses on the voice of our students, our climate, how students perceive each other, how they perceive their environment, how they perceive their learning. As you see, we have scored for many years over 95% in the top 3 areas. But the last area, we still struggle a little bit with. So let me talk a little bit about that area. This is the area where students, how they perceive each other, how they perceive how their peers' ability to successfully communicate, resolve conflict, and interact with each other. So we're still trying to work on that area. And by doing so, we increased our number of class meetings and life skill workshops. Our next slide, AAP goals. All right, so you'll see that there are 5 main areas, from ELA through engagement. Our main platform that we use to educate our students is standard-based, based on the Ohio Department of Education. It's called Peak Few Ed for all of our subjects. In ELA, you'll see that we also use Achieve 3000. And Achieve 3000 really supports us in providing intervention. It measures students' lexile level, and based on that, it gives them reading at that level and helps them to grow in their comprehension and their writing skills. In addition to that, I don't know if you see all those things in the second bullet, but we use them all. My teachers are so creative. They find everything and anything to really support our students and try it out. We meet students where they are, and they really do mean that. So that's our ELA. If you look at math, we use Peak Fuel Ed, as our main curriculum. But in addition to that, we have used IXL and Imagine Math as interventions. So once we see a student is struggling, our teachers put them on those platforms to help build their understanding. And these platforms scaffold, so they build students and meet them where they are and build them up. In addition to that, you see our last bullet, we have the staff-focused math sessions. That's my staff working. So if you come into a classroom, you'll see students of all grade levels. You may see our teachers working individually or in small groups with students. Our next one, special education. We use the Gold Book Toolbook to really help align our resources and our reading. We use small group focused lessons that address and develop student mastery. Next, PBIS. We write SMART goals and review those with students weekly to make sure they're making progress, and we use restorative practices. And last, our students and family have opportunities to participate in SEL initiatives and college and career readiness workshops throughout the year. All right, moving on. Our AAP focus areas. As I mentioned earlier, we have quarterly student and family engagement, SEL initiatives, and college and career activities. We communicate with our family in many ways, from making phone calls, that direct communication, to our website and social media, to our newsletter, any way possible to connect with our families. In addition to that, we offer incentive field experiences for our students. All right, our partners in education. We partner with everyone. If they have something for our kids, we're going to partner with them. So as you see, MCPC, Project ACT, Making a Difference, LGBT community, Youth Opportunities Unlimited. I can't name everyone, but as you can see, and these are only 2/3 of our partners. We have many. Bright spots. So if you take a look at the report card from 2021 to 2023, every year, our algebra scores increased from 15.4% to 33.3% on the OST. And school-wide, both our math and ELA are growing together. Student and family engagement has increased by 15% over the last year as a result of our SEL initiatives. We have a strong partnership with Magnet Manufacturing and MCPC, STAD. They actually created opportunities for our students to do hands-on activities monthly. And at MCPC, this number has grown since I have done this. Over 50% of our students are employed there at the MCPC STAD. Every year, we successfully graduate students at high numbers. But guess what? If you look at the report card, you may not see all the students that we graduate because we take all students. As I said, we not only look at the 4th and 5th year, we take 6th, 7th, 8th. So we take students no matter where they are up until the limit of our district, naturally, and support them so that they can become productive citizens. So, last slide. These are our celebrations. Our motto is not only we meet you where you are and take you where you need to be, but we rise through difficulties to honors, and our students do just that. We have trade fairs, family nights, career days. We attend every event that can give our students the life skills and the social and emotional growth that they need to be successful. Thank you. Thank you, Board, for allowing me to present in front of you tonight.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, and it's really phenomenal to see the work that you're doing. I was impressed by a couple of things. One, just seeing the diversity of your staff, particularly relative to your how many black teachers you have in your school, and also the ratio of black students that you have. So that is great work. I know that you guys are doing some intentional work there. And then also the OST coherence. And so when you say coherence, is that the proficiency? Are those the pass rates?
Those are our proficiency levels.
Proficiency levels.
Yes.
What would you attribute to the growth that you've had, particularly in Algebra 1? Is it the curriculum? Is it a particular strategy?
It's a combination of our online intervention platforms and those thoughtful individuals that I pointed out earlier. We decided as a team to come together and really work on lessons. So you can imagine a lot of the apprehension that people have when working on math. Well, our team decided to come together, our math teachers that we have, because we have different core subject teachers. And so our math teachers, they design lessons, they teach us, they walk us through it. we take that back to our students and we do small group instruction. So it's a combination.
Well, that's good. It's something to learn there because we have some schools that are still struggling, in, particularly in the high school levels, to get those pass rates up. My last question is around graduation rates. So you said that you're graduating at high levels. Do you know what the graduation rate is? And I guess combined with that, sometimes alternative programs, the student's graduation rate is attached to the home school that they started with. Is that the same for School of One, or do you guys have your own individual graduation rate?
No, so once we get the student, as long as they're with us, they're counted, as far as our graduation rate. And so our fourth and fifth year, our fifth year is always higher, it's around 79%. But we graduate students that are, like I said, 6-year, 7-year, and they come to us trying to look for a way to get their diploma.
Yeah. What's the 4-year?
The fourth-year graduate, so 4 years cohort.
No, what is your 4-year graduation rate?
Oh,
Sorry.
I'm sorry, it's like 68 point something, yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, like 68.
Thank you.
Any other discussion from board members? No? Okay, thank you so much. It's been a
Thank
pleasure
you.
hearing from you.
All right. Thank you so much, Ms. Sims. It's just, you're doing incredible work there, and the school team that is back there, thank you for joining tonight, and keep up the good work. Next, we have our next item in the CEO report, and so I want to present for the board's discussion and review this evening, Resolution 4.02, approving and submitting a deficit reduction plan to the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce. With this resolution, the Board of Education will be approving the school district's deficit reduction plan, which must be submitted to the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce by February 29th. Under Ohio law, since the school district's most recent 5-year forecast, adopted by this board on November 21st, 2023, projected deficits in any of the first 3 years of the 5-year period, the school district must submit a board-approved written plan to eliminate any current year deficits to avoid the projected future deficits. CMSD's proposed deficit reduction plan sets forth our strategy for reducing expenditures over the next 3 fiscal years in order to eliminate these projected deficits. In order to meet the February 29th deadline for submitting this plan to the DEW at the state, the board will need to vote to approve this deficit reduction plan at the February 27th board business meeting. Chief Financial Officer Kevin Stockdale and I will present the deficit reduction plan momentarily, but I'll turn it first over to our board chair, Sarah Ellicott.
Thank you, Dr. Morgan, and thank you, Mr. Stockdale, for the preparation. I know it's been a lot of work. I just want to take a moment to point out to my board colleagues the statutory role of the Board of Education as it relates to this deficit reduction plan. Since the school district is in a state of fiscal precaution, the board has a very important and specific role with regard to not only voting to approve the plan, but also monitoring the implementation of the plan. So we are required to include in the plan, as you know, an explanation of how the board will be kept informed on the status of the plan's implementation, and including financial reports to monitor and manage the district's financial status. The DEW may request evidence that the board is monitoring the implementation of the plan. And as we review and discuss this deficit reduction plan, I just want the board to be fully aware of our critical monitoring role as it relates to this process. And so you can go right ahead, Mr. Stockdale.
Good evening. A little bit of background, and I always start with the background when we talk about 5-year forecasts, and this is an extension of the most recent 5-year forecast. So as a reminder, yes, the board does adopt twice per year the 5-year forecast as required under state law, most recently in November. It includes the current, it's called a 5-year forecast because it includes the current year forecast as well as the next 4 years. In case, as described earlier, if there's a negative balance, we're required to submit a deficit reduction plan, which is why we're here today. And I think most importantly for us, is understanding how we got here. And one of the significant factors is the availability of ARP ESSER funds that the district received. $465 million, which was time limited. It was actually a series of 12 grants, 10 of which have concluded, and there were restrictions on what the money could be spent on. So that money had to be spent in a relatively quick period of time, and due to the way that the federal government required states to provide funds to districts, our district received a disproportionately large amount of money, and it was based on poverty index and similar factors. As noted, we are projecting a negative cash forecast starting next fiscal year, and so we are reviewing the deficit reduction plan tonight. This is the adopted five-year forecast from last November. There are a few important things to remind you that we look at with this slide specifically. First, the last row is the unencumbered cash balance. This would be kind of like our bank account balance minus any checks that are outstanding. That number is required to be positive in the current year and the next 2 years. And as in the forecast, we have a negative forecast for beginning next fiscal year. If you look at the third row of it, the net excess or shortfall, that is the difference between what we bring in revenue and what we expend every year. And as you can see, there are significant negative ongoing deficits projected that are much larger than the cash balance. So there are two issues that we need to deal with. What we're specifically working on tonight is we have to submit a plan that gets the final row into the positive for the next 2 years.
Stockdale, if you don't mind, one other thing I want to just share, or actually just add to what Chief Stockdale was sharing, was really on the third row, our deficit. Because if you're looking at the end year cash balance, you may think we just have to solve for $18 million. But if we're not closing the gap on the deficit, which is in that third row, our deficit next year starts to be $143 million for the district. So we have a lot of work to do in terms of closing that gap for the deficit. This is what, as Chief Stockdale mentioned, was presented at our November five-year forecast and showing that. So as he mentioned, we're looking at that last row, not only on the end of year cash balance, but on the deficit and closing that gap. So thank you.
Thank you. So we will actually be adopting, the board will be adopting multiple things. There will be a resolution. Going along with the resolution is a workbook, which is a spreadsheet. It includes the changes and assumptions, which I'll talk about in a few minutes, as well as changes to revenue potentially, expenditure reductions, and then a revised forecast. The narrative, which is in the form of a letter from the board to the Department of Education and Workforce, provides written context for the plan. And I think it's probably more helpful for the general public to understand what we're actually doing here. So the first item that we have is the change in assumptions, and we have focused on preserving school-based budgets first and foremost, understanding that school-based leaders make the best decisions about what their schools need. The forecast did include annual 2% increases in school-based budgets, and while we will not be reducing that amount, we will be holding it flat for the next 2 years. And that will allow school leaders to make those decisions and preserve that budget pool.
Addition there, just as we're sharing about the school-based budgeting pool remaining flat, one of the commitments I made when we started this journey on our budget deficit was that we would make cuts at central office, and you'll see some of those projected cuts that we are proposing. But we wanted to preserve schools and protecting the instructional core. And so one of the commitments we have for doing that is making sure, as Chief Stockdale mentioned, the school-based budgeting pool, so the pool of dollars we put to schools that principals have autonomy over for creating their school budgets, will remain flat from this year to, from this school year to next year, and principals receive their budgets today.
So this is a change in assumption. It's not a reduction. It is a change in what we are saying in projected increases. It's a savings to the forecast of $21.1 million over the 2 years. The next one is our self-insurance healthcare plan, and healthcare funding comes in from a variety of sources for us. The overwhelmingly largest portion is employer contributions, and like a lot of employers, we saw costs increase dramatically after COVID, and they have leveled off a little bit since then. We have been following the recommendations of our insurance consultant as to how much we should be adding to the fund, but we have developed a sizable fund balance, and the amount that we're contributing is currently exceeding what we need to maintain a healthy fund balance. So our recommendation is that we reduce those contributions for 2 years. We will actually still increase those 2 years, but we'll just increase at a lower rate, and that will allow us to maintain the recommended at least 75-day cash balance that our healthcare consultant set for us, and that will save $15 million over those 2 years. I'll also note that with that, it's $10 million the first year, $5 million the second year, recognizing that we have less certainty over the second year of the forecast for costs. For revenue enhancements, this would be the section of the report where a district could talk about charges for students, or if there were going to be additional community support. We don't have anything at this point that we're including in the plan. We do want to point out the Mackenzie Scott gift and what role that plays in our financial picture. The Mackenzie Scott gift was received in 2022 at the end of the year. It was added to the general fund, and it is part of our cash balance ongoing. We made it through a year of grant making by students, and they were able to provide new opportunities. However, at this point, not including it in our budget process, not including those funds in our budget process, would directly increase the deficit. And so our recommendation, which the board adopted, was to recognize those as part of the general fund and to use those to really maintain the activities that had been supported by ARP-ESSER temporarily while those funds were available.
Thank you so much, Chief Stockdale. And so now into the plan. One of the things I want to share is that this is a draft. It's a draft for a couple of reasons. One, because we don't have as the district leaders, we do not have the authority to actually approve this. Our board has to. And so we're presenting this to our board tonight with our best thinking, but from that we welcome any feedback from our board and also our community around that. And also draft because we are still in the process of hearing ideas and making sure that we get the questions answered. So I want to just ground ourselves in how we got here in terms of making some of the decisions and what we would recommend that would come off the table to improve our financial position. And I want to start with the Listen and Learn Tour. Today is day 204 for me in the role. On February 24th of this month, it'll be 7 months into the role. And as I started in the first 100 days, really prioritized the Listen and Learn Tour. To date, have done nearly 40 of those Listen and Learn sessions and have been in 52 schools to date. And also continue to hear just feedback as I'm out on the ground. But we're not only taking the information from our Listen and Learn sessions, for which we were using the Let's Talk platform, from which I know most people heard is now live, and we're using that to gather feedback from our community. But we also used the CEO search listening sessions, of which there was thousands of pieces of feedback during the CEO search around what the community needs, what the community wants to prioritize. And these were some of the things we heard. We heard about safety. We heard about a high-quality curriculum. We heard about equity and access across our system. We heard about some of the programs we offer in our schools to make sure that all students across our city have access in them. So these were things we were using as our guiding light for our plan and also as we make decisions. One other note that I will mention as we are continuing to gather feedback from the community throughout this process is that this is an ongoing process. So as we are continuing listen and learn sessions. After the state of the schools, we continued to have listen and learn sessions where we asked questions about how will we prioritize our budget, and we heard pieces of feedback from that. Of course, from listening to our community, we received our core values, and this was information that we heard from our community, from our staff, from our students in terms of what our core values would be, and this is guiding our strategic plan. We also received our strategic priorities, and all of this information has been shared before, was information I shared at the State of the Schools, but this all came from our community. So I just want to make sure I continue to share that through line of using the information we've heard out in the field that I've been hearing as I've been listening to people to drive the decisions we're making in the system. Also, as we do this process through our communication strategy, and we have a strategy for making sure we communicate this information out, we have our key stakeholders, which are our scholars, there are our parents, there are our staff, there are labor partners, including Cleveland Teachers Union, our elected officials. So there are many partners that we have in this. But we want to make sure throughout this process, even though they are difficult decisions, that there are ways we want to show up. We want to be transparent. We want to be clear. We want to make sure that as we're making decisions, we're thinking about the future in mind, that we're communicating this with compassion, and that we are also providing employee assistance across, as we are going through this process. So with that said, I want to, before I dive into the plan, I do want to just share a little bit of this timeline. As Chief Stockdale mentioned, this plan that we have, not only did we share our 5-year forecast in November of 2023, the past 2 years prior to last year, the 5-year forecast starting in 2021 showed that this upcoming school year would be the year we would have a deficit. So not only did we share that information, but the previous administration shared 5-year forecasts that is starting in starting in 2021, that next school year, the 24-25 school year, would have a budget deficit. The other thing I want to note is that the previous administration, when they presented the 5-year forecast in November 2022, 70% of the ARP-ESSER funds were assumed to go away. So whether that was communicated, that was what was baked into the 5-year forecast that was presented in November of 2022. Of course, I was not here at the time. Chief Stockdale was not here at the time. But those were the numbers. It was assumed that 70% of the non-personnel expenses in ARP-ESSER would go away. So we're here now. We're here in the 24-25 school year, and we now need to make those decisions. ARP-ESSER is going away, as you heard, and now we're just communicating that process that has been communicated for the past few years. As you can see from this timeline, in this month, we are sharing this deficit reduction plan, this draft right now. At the end of this month, the board will approve a plan, and then we have to submit a plan to the state by the end of the month. But this is not our budget. We are just kicking off our budgeting process. Central office has been doing some work since December, and will continue to do some work on our budget throughout the spring. And school leaders received their budgets today and are also continuing the school budgeting process throughout the spring. I've shared some of the assumptions, or some of, not the assumptions, some of the guiding principles that went into this plan. But one thing I also want to note, we've been meeting with the state to get feedback on our draft plan. And one of the things when Chief Stockdale, myself, and our Chief of Staff, J.R. Tompkinson, when we were meeting with the state, one thing they shared with us, he said, do not submit a plan of anything that you're not going to be able to do. They said that the last time the district submitted a plan, which I believe was in 2019 or 2020, the district noted that we would close like 30 schools. And they said, you didn't do that. You didn't close the schools. And so what they told us, they said, you need to submit a plan that is within your locus of control. And so with that said, what I'm presenting tonight are things that are within our locus of control, things that we know today, that if we made some changes in the way we were making either cuts or the way we were operating, we would improve our financial position. So what you will not see in this plan are school closures. You will not see in this plan anything in terms of additional funds that may or may not come in, because we don't know that today. That doesn't mean that those aren't things that we will look at and rate on what we know today and what's within our locus of control. So now let's talk about the plan. As I've made a commitment, I made it during my State of the Schools, as I've been out talking, and it's part of one of my goals that I have with the board, is that we would make cuts at central office. And when I say this, I also want to note, I know a lot of times the question is what is happening at schools, because we know schools are so important. That's where our kids are, that's where our scholars are, and our schools matter. But I also realize we have staff and employees and hard workers that are working at our central office. And so I do not use the term central office lightly as I talk about some of the changes, but when we think about how we want to prioritize, we want to make sure that we are starting with central office, with us first. And in this first round of central office reductions that we're looking at, the chiefs, executive leadership team, and also our senior leaders have been looking at their budgets and saying, what are areas that we know preliminarily we can make some additional cuts on? So the first thing that we've projected, and this is a projected, is that we would have a minimum of 25 FTEs at central office that can be either closed in terms of the positions or positions that will be repurposed. These are positions at 1111 or East Professional Center. There are additional central office cuts that will be made, and I'll talk about that, and also some central office cuts that are staff that do not work at 1111 and East Professional Center that may be impacted. The other thing that we looked at was a reduction in central office travel, our conferences, and staff food. And by making these preliminary cuts in phase 1 reductions, we've saved about $5.3 million over the course of 2 years. The next proposal is for our summer learning. As I mentioned before, many of the programs here have had an impact. And because we had ARP-ESSER funds, we were able to do extraordinary things for our scholars in a very extraordinary period of time. But they were dollars that we always knew were going away in 2024. And so as you look at this journey here in terms of our summer learning program, starting in fiscal year 20, we only spent $1.2 million on summer learning. And actually, if you were looking at the previous year, because you may be thinking 2020 was the pandemic, when we looked at that, we were only spending $3.7 million on summer school prior to the pandemic. As you look how much it increased in FY22 to $10 million, to FY23, $15.5 million, we increased. We do not have the funds, the ESSER funds that allowed us to increase our summer program, and so we need to make adjustments. And I want to tell you some of the things that we're thinking about. So last year when we had summer learning, we serviced about 4,200 students, and we only had 90 minutes of instructional time during the summer learning day. But we also did not have any mechanism to measure the instructional impact. I know that there may have been an assessment that was given at the end of summer, but we had no way that if you were to ask today, what is the value add instructionally of summer school? We could talk about the qualitative value add, but there were no goals or mechanisms set for how we would measure the effectiveness of instruction during summer school. One of the things we want to do this year, even though we're reducing the capacity will be for 3,500 students approximately, we want to increase the amount of instructional time so that students are actually getting some instruction and enrichment. And we also want to introduce a mechanism that we can say, how much was the instructional value of summer school? So that as we're making these decisions in the future, we can actually make them with data in mind, not just with the money, but we also should be making these decisions based on what is the value add of instruction? Because if we're seeing some of those things, maybe there are investments we need to make in the future, or maybe there are things that will scale back. But without that goal or data that we did not have in the past, we're not able to make those decisions today. We have to have an MOU with our partners in education, the Cleveland Teachers Union, on this, and I know our chief academic officer as well as others on her team are working with our CTU to get the specifics around summer learning, but this is our draft proposal of how we can get to the funding. The other thing I will note, even though we're making reductions, we are not going as low as we were pre-pandemic. So even if you're looking at FY20, remember I said in FY18-19 or in FY19, it was $3.7 million. We still are almost doubling that in terms of the investment we're looking into summer learning. Out of school time. This is another one. Oh, I want to make sure that our slides here, we want to make sure our slides are larger there. There we go, thank you. Our out of school time. This is an area that I know that I've been hearing a lot about, have been meeting with many of our partners, and I want to be very clear that I know the value that we have been able to provide through our out of school time programs, our supplemental out of school time programs because of ARP-ESSER. But I also want to take you on that same journey of how much we were spending on supplemental out of school time prior to the pandemic. And then once we received ARP ESSER funds, it increased to $17 million that we're spending on external partners to provide out-of-school time for programming for our scholars. Like I said, great program. We've been able to service about 7,200 students through this programming. Not all of our students, but 7,200 of our students for this. But this money is going away. And so there's some decisions we have to make. One thing I also want to be clear, a lot of times when people think of out-of-school times or extracurricular programs, they ask me, are you talking about your sports programs? Are you talking about your band, cheerleading, the programs that teachers may do after school with students? I'm not talking about those. Our athletic department centrally funds our athletic programs. Different principals with their school-based budgets fund certain programs at their school. You know, when we think about band and arts that we have a central office department and budget that funds some of these programs, and so that's not included in these funds. These were merely our out-of-school time providers, our partners that did some really great work with us to provide some out-of-school time programming for our students, and we were only able to increase it during the pandemic, and now we need to think about doing things differently. I will say, I believe that these programs have a value, and so I know I'm meeting with our out-of-school time providers later this month. I want to hear from our out-of-school time providers, how were you providing programming before the pandemic? And what other sources of income or revenue can we be getting to actually keep the programs going, because the district does not have any funding? I want to share an example. I was meeting with a provider and asking the question of what we did prior to the pandemic, and the amount of dollars that the district paid that provider to provide service for our scholars prior to the pandemic was zero. The district provided no funding, and all the funding for that provider was coming from an external source. During the pandemic, because we had COVID relief dollars, that increased to $2.1 million. And so, you know, as we think about the ARP ESSER dollars going away, we want to think about the other sources that can continue this programming. But right now, the recommendation is for this funding to go away. Another area that we're thinking about, and this is within the district's locus of control, but we're still having some discussions, and that is aligning our school calendars to for all students to be on the same school calendar. Right now, we have extended year, we have year-round, we have schools that have extra minutes, and we also have our traditional calendars. Right now, that sets up some inequities. We have some schools that are receiving disproportionately more resources. That means more time in school day. Their staff are receiving more resources than other staff. And we do want to really make sure that we are equitable across the board. And to that point of measuring impact, right now, the academic performance at all those schools varies. We have some of our best schools in the system that are under this model, and we have some schools that struggle with academic performance under this model. So we need to really ask ourselves the question, what model are we having, what curriculum are we having, what amount of time are we having that gets us the highest academic performance, all of those goals that we're setting as a system. And right now, this strategy is one that is a strategy that was used, but there's no academic performance variable that we can point to across the board that the extra time has caused. We do know that this does have an impact on staff, so we are already meeting to discuss what this impact could look like. We're also meeting to see what can be done, and we're still having discussions around this item. We do plan to bring this in front of the board, our 24-25 school calendar. I know people have been asking. I heard public comment the last time of like, where's our calendar? We need to plan. I hear you. We're working on it, and we want to make sure we get this information back to you. But this is one of the things we're proposing, and it's still in draft form. But if we do this, this would save us nearly $14 million over the course of 2 years. Student technology, this is another area. We know that during the pandemic, there was a time the only way students could receive instruction was through a device. And we're grateful that the dollars allowed us to scale up our one-to-one strategy. But as of today, right now, the way this is implemented in our schools varies across the board. We have some schools, I'm sitting in one right now where, when I observed it earlier in the school year, every student had a device, and this was early, it was like on the second day of school. It was in the first week of school or something here at Garrett Morgan. Every student had their device. When there was an operational issue, we were easily able to switch to remote. and it was because the one-to-one strategy was enacted. But across the board in our schools, we have some schools that not every student has a device. We have some schools that not every classroom is using a device in instruction. Not every student is taking devices home. And there are great reasons from our school leaders and our teachers of sometimes not taking those devices home. But because this strategy was implemented with varied results and varied success, we are looking and rethinking this strategy. Also, as we think about cutting back on things like hotspots that we had in homes during that time, and also just the amount of devices we purchase, I want to also note that the city has a commitment of making sure that every home is connected, and there's a strategy that our city has regarding that, and we want to lean on our partners in the work that is also happening so that the district doesn't always have to bear the direct cost for that. But we do, as we're rethinking this strategy, we have a preliminary estimate of savings of $6.4 million, and depending on what the strategy is, we may can save more. So I want to talk a little bit about what we've done so far. We've had some assumptions. As Chief Stockdale mentioned, he shared those assumptions that we are baking into our forecast that will save us about $36.1 million. And then all the reductions I just mentioned saves us $91.4 million. But there's still $41 million in our plan that we as central office leaders need to make additional cuts. So there's a phase 2 of reductions that we're doing at central office. And when I'm saying central office, these are all budgets that roll up to someone on the executive leadership team or someone through senior leadership. It's not the dollars that schools have our principals have direct autonomy over. These are central office budgets. And this $41 million in reductions are going to come from personnel, reductions that we have to do. They're going to come from professional service contracts that we may need to end or rethink. They're going to come from non-personnel lines and expenses. So we still have more work to do in that budgeting process because $41 million is still an area that we have work to do, and our team feels really confident in hitting these goals, but it will be challenging. And we're working with our team to make sure we're holding our staff, we're communicating the information as we get it, and that we do things in a timely fashion. So now, if everything I presented gets approved, this would be our updated 5-year forecast. But I want to point you to those 2 rows that Chief Stockdale shared with you earlier in the 5-year forecast that we presented in November. If you look at the bottom row, yes, have we accomplished the goal that the state has asked us to for the next 2 fiscal years, as well as this fiscal year, to be in the black? Yes. But I want you to look at the 25-26 school year and how much will be in the black. Not much. But more than anything, I want you to look at row 3, the deficit. That $143 million deficit that I said starts next school year. We will still have a deficit. We will still have a deficit starting next year that grows year over year. So even with these hard choices we've made, and I know that there's feedback on the choices we've made, there's still work we have to do. There's still work we have to do to close the gap. And, when people ask me questions, where is that going to come from? We're exploring those options. There are ways we can think about that more money comes into the system, but there are ways we have to think about in terms of how we're operating, how many schools we have, how many staff we have. These are all future questions we have to answer. So with that said, there are a few things I want to recap that we have to submit this plan to the state. The state did not come, we did not go to the state came to us, and it is our fiscal responsibility as we're doing this work for our scholars and our community that we have a financially sound system. So we have to submit a plan. We also are confident that we're going to address these reductions by way of looking at central office first and trying to protect schools as much as we can. And finally, this is a multi-year process. Because if you look here, even if we do this work now, we have more work to do in the coming years. And so this is just the beginning of an ongoing process of where we're thinking about where can additional savings be, how might we think we're operating. But I also have optimism in terms of our future goals. And I'll be sharing more about that throughout this year in terms of how can we make our goals and reach the goals that we have but also deliver on a promise for our Cleveland children that they deserve, and also our educators and our families. So stay tuned for more of that information. Just know that these are tough decisions. Our team is working really hard. We also are opening it up for any questions that people may have, not tonight live, but there will be a way that you can get questions, submit your questions through the Let's Talk feature. We'll be sending out an email to our staff that will have this information, and also a way that you can submit questions, and we'll make sure that we get that out to our community as well. I know I'm meeting with a group of students that can also share and submit questions with me. So with that said, Chair Ellicott.
Yeah, thank you, CEO Morgan. I want to take a moment to thank you and Mr. Stockdale and your whole team for all of the thought and work that has gone into this challenging process. I also want to acknowledge all of our staff and our families and the stress and anxiety that I'm sure everybody is feeling as we make these really tough decisions, and know that, you know, those things are top of mind for the board, and I know for the CEO, and that we're all working to do our best as we address this deficit. So thank you all. And now I'll turn it over for discussion from the board. Are there any questions from board members? Dr. Sridhar.
Dr. Morgan, thank you so much for the presentation, Mr. Stockdale, and again, all of your leadership team. Thank you so much for the work that you've put into preparing this presentation. It clearly was not easy work. There are a number of decisions that are incredibly difficult that have been made, or at least are in the process of being made. I do have one observation that is there is a little bit of a theme throughout this presentation, and I think that the observation doesn't necessarily change the budgetary decisions that you're presenting, but I believe will set us up in the future to make better decisions, and that has to do with setting up metrics and frameworks for assessment of how these interventions have proceeded, right? So in many of these cases, so when you talked about summer school, or when you talked about technology, when you talked about out of school time, there are incredible and visible improvements in what our students and our families are experiencing. Unfortunately, however, we don't have clear and measurable data that shows that these improvements have had the kinds of impacts that we know they are having. So I would encourage us as a district, as we move forward, that we set up much stronger mechanisms and data systems for us to assess what we're doing, and keeping a real track of student performance and student outcomes before interventions are implemented, and keeping track of them as they are proceeding, so that the next time we are faced with difficult situations with respect to the budget, we can make decisions based on things that we know have worked and not worked, and not have to make these rather drastic changes. I know you agree that these are rather drastic changes. But I also see the reasons for why you're doing that. I don't know if you had a response to these assessment mechanisms.
Yeah, no, point well taken, and definitely some of the things we looked at, if there were goals and KPIs set up on the front end, or just a clear strategy of what we were looking in the end, it doesn't make the decisions any easier, but it does give you a guiding light and a strategic way of mapping the effectiveness moving forward. And so definitely agree with that reflection, and also that charge moving forward as we make these decisions.
Yes, Ms. Hudnall.
Dr. Warren, again, thank you for your presentation. I appreciated the clarity and the talk over that you gave to each slide. As a parent, I would like to know, if I'm not watching this meeting and I don't frequent YouTube, the CMSD's YouTube channel, where on the website will parents be able to go and click through this presentation in draft form, and then once it's finalized, to better understand on their own time what the changes are?
That's a great question. One of the things we're doing is making sure that this information is out for our team, and also we'll take that feedback in a way that it can be on our website so families can review it. And then also we can put the Let's Talk information there. I do know that I believe the robocall for Let's Talk went out this week ahead of this so that families are aware of how to submit questions. And so we'll get that information out and put that in an accessible way. And we'll also, even once we put it out, I know sometimes it is still hard to find, and so we also welcome that feedback if there's anyone that's struggling getting the information.
Actually, if I may make a suggestion, I think this presentation is nice, and when it's in full form, it'll be good. But I would encourage us to actually have separate pages for each of these initiatives that can go into some detail on what impacts individual parents and families will have. I mean, some of these things may not have direct impact, but it'll be clear to we need to make it clear and easily accessible to families what impact they'll have.
Yes, Ms. Welch-Howell.
Thank you. I want to echo the sentiment that thank you for the transparency and thank you for walking us through all of this information. The clarity is helpful, and like all of my colleagues have said, I know these are very difficult decisions. I would ask maybe as much as you can share here, and then with whatever information we provide to families, could you just share a little bit more context on the approach that the district will take to supporting families as some of these programs change?
Great question. So even for things like summer learning or out of school time, I know particularly for summer learning, we've already been meeting with some of our partners to say, what are some of the other programs that are taking place in the summer? We do know, we've heard from Cleveland Public Library. We know the city has some different programs that are taking place, and we welcome that approach to other partners as well. I was meeting with a partner earlier. I was at the Natural History Museum, which is a very beautiful space, and it's shaping up to be really great, and asking, what programs are you running during the summer? Because aside of the program that we are running in the system, we would love to serve as a quarterback and share information with our families, share information that can be taking place so that we can get that information to our families and they can make the best decisions as possible. To our out-of-school time providers, I know we are in a space going to be meeting this month, and I really want to hear ideas and solutions, not only in ways we can keep the funding going, but if there are programs that are taking place that you're hosting in your own site, maybe not at our school site, that we can be getting that information out to our families, that will go a long way. So this, and some of for some of this information, it may be ending the district's direct financial support, but it is not our support behind the program. And this is really our rallying cry to say, what else can we do to either keep the programs going or make sure families have access to some of these programs, even if the direct funding isn't coming from the system.
Thank you for that. And then one more follow-on question that might be a takeaway. But can you all provide some more information about the device usage so far, just what we have usage across device types, and then anything we know about the expectations around the city's plan for internet access, just the timing?
I can get you the specifics on that. I know we are tracking how many students have devices. I think the last report I saw, there was still maybe about 7 or 8% of our students that still need devices in terms of tracking the devices. But usage, I can get that information for you. And also more specifically, I know that we have our information technology officer that has been really tracking, making sure that there's connectivity for our families, and we can think about what that city plan is and come back with that. I also want to note, speaking of our IT officer, one of the strategies that the district started was the Connect Center, and that opened this summer. And the Connect Center, as I like to think about it, is our district's own Geek Squad. I know staff can use it. It can be information for students to use, but from my understanding, it's also something that families can even use to help think about technology and resources. So we can come back with some of those things that we have as a district strategy, but more on the data we use in terms of our device strategy. The one thing I can say qualitatively, and this, I know this hits home, we have had calamity days that we've had to use this year, and when we've had to use the calamity days, one of the first questions, aside of just making sure we need to have plan and agreement with our teachers union, I always ask, are we ready if we need to be remote instruction? And there's only been one instance of the time we have to use calamity days. And I said, we're standing in this building now of the instance we've been able to use that. And so that's just a qualitative anecdote of where we are on the implementation of the one-to-one strategy.
That's helpful, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Briggs.
Dr. Morgan, prior to this meeting, you and I have had exchanged some ideas and discussion on this presentation, and I just want to compliment you and Mr. Stockdale and your staff on again, what was said, the clarity of this presentation, the honesty with which you've presented it, and the optimism that you have going forward.
Is that all? Okay. Thank you, Dr. Morgan. A couple of questions from me. Piggybacking off the device question and discussion from Ms. Welch-Howell, do we have data on device usage before the pandemic? Like how, I know that we had devices for students before then. I just don't know how widespread it was. And then obviously remote learning required that we have more of them and do the one-to-one system. But I wonder like what we did with devices before we needed to be all remote. I'm not sure if that's possible to find.
Yeah, I can get that information for you. Yeah, I can get that information. I do know that there were schools that had, laptop carts, so teachers were using, technology in the classroom. That's been a practice that has been around for a while. But I can get the information. I don't know if we had any schools that were quote-unquote one-to-one where a student had their own device and could take it home. But I can get that information to see if we have that data.
Okay, thank you. And then regarding out-of-school time, I'm very glad to hear that out-of-school time partners were able to operate and secure funding to operate in the district from outside sources before the ESSER funding happened. That seems positive and promising for continuing to operate. And also really appreciate the work that your team is doing to identify, other partners and things that are already happening in the city that we can connect students to. I have a question about on slide 18 where we're reducing capacity to 3,500 for summer learning. Do we have a sense of how we'll decide like who's going to participate in that? Have we thought about that yet?
Yeah, great question. That's part of the work that we want to do with the group that is meeting to look at the MOU. There are many ways we can approach it. There could be certain grade levels that we may focus on. There may be certain schools that we may focus on. I want to note when they're actually looking at schools, and I can get the specific numbers, but I think in 2022, we had 31 buildings that we were operating summer learning out of, and then last year we reduced that to 20 or 20 plus, somewhere in there, and I can get the specific numbers. So over the past couple of years, we've already been making some changes in our programming. I don't know if that change from 2022 to 2023 was due to projecting that the cost may be going down because we actually went up in how much we spent in 22 to 23, but we do know the amount of schools that were used from 22 to 23 did go down. And so, but I can get that specific, information for you.
Okay, yeah, I'm sure it's a work in progress, but just interested in where we are in thinking about it. Yes, Dr. Streeter.
Dr. Morgan, this has to do with school calendars. I know that we're going to have a longer conversation about school calendars in March, but I just wanted to check in. So there's your point that says with limited exceptions, there's a proposal to remove extra days and minutes. What kinds of exceptions are you thinking about?
Right now, a big part of that is meeting with the team to think about the model. There are some models in some schools that, the program, it may really impact the program or even accessibility of the program. So when I think about some of our alternative programs, and right now, when we're looking at this, we're looking at all of our schools, but we're thinking about some of our alternative programs. We do have a program, a school that we operate for students that are temporarily incarcerated or that are incarcerated. And so, we have to look at the model and what that's actually doing for the student and supporting them if this model changes. And so that's some of the things that we're looking at. on top of also looking at the staff impact across the board. But that's a little bit more of that caveat there. But right now, we don't have any specifics there, as the specific recommendation and proposal is still in draft form.
Any other discussion? Mr. Hurd?
Thank you. Couple of questions on slide number 22, and specifically the personnel assumptions. I'm not sure if I know what non-personnel categories means. And the other assumptions and reductions that we've talked about thus far, we've been able to tie some numbers to. And I know for the adults sitting here in the audience today, concerned about their future with the district, do we have a feel for what those personnel reductions will look like? I understand that with any organization, the vast majority of your expenditures are people, and the people need to get some feeling of how these reductions could impact their future with the district. And, you know, if we say we're going to reduce 500 people, what does that mean in terms of dollars and cents? And also, what are these non-personnel categories defined as?
Great question. So when we think about this phase 2 of central office reductions, there are 3 categories: personnel, which are positions, and I'll get to your second part of your question. There are purchase services, so these are contracts, so like contractual services, agreements, and maybe working that we have that would fall into that category. And then there's non-personnel. Non-personnel are supplies. They are they could be programs, they may be materials. These are all things that fall into the non-personnel expenditure. So those are the 3 categories, and we have to look at all of them when we think about this $41 million. Right now, I do not have a direct projection for you. We're starting the process of looking at it. We were able to identify those early 25, just based on things that we know within our departments or structures that chiefs have already started thinking about. But we're going through the process now of identifying additional positions. We are holding ourselves as a central office accountable to making sure that we not only hit this target, but that also we have a rigorous process for doing this. So as I mentioned, there are positions that are outside of 1111 and East Professional Center that are central office that may be impacted. But we are, as chiefs, we're prioritizing 1111 and East Professional Center. We know that most people, when they think of central office, they think of people that are working at 1111 that are also working at East Professional Center. But I hope to come back with a more specific target. We're doing a process to model and different things out, but I would hate to share a number that either create angst or under-projects where we're looking at. But we are going through that process to look at those 3 categories. The other thing I will note, and it's kind of related to your question, but a suggestion that I got from a staff member, and I do appreciate recommendations and solutions. One of the things I share is these are tough decisions, and even though we have a lot of smart people looking at the numbers, there are a lot of smart people out there, a lot more smart ideas that we may have not thought about. And when I sent an all-staff email about a week and a half ago, I got suggestions and recommendations for staff. So I've read those, and they were great. One of the common themes that came up was around the 1111 building, and have we considered, and people asked in sincerity, have we considered moving out of 1111? A few things to note around that. Our lease yearly for 1111 is about $2 million. So every year we spend about $2 million. You look at our deficit, it's $143 million. So would make some traction, but not nearly close the gap where we need to. So we spend about $2 million every year plus parking. But also I want to note is that we just signed the contract. I think we just renewed the agreement either in summer of 2022 or in July of 2023 for a 5-year agreement with our building for 1111. So if we were to move out now, not only would we save the $2 million, but we would also have to buy ourselves out of the contract, which will put us in the hole of $10 million. And so it is something that if we were not in a position that we were in a 5-year agreement for where we were that was just signed, I would love to explore that or think about it. But also if there are really great ideas that people have and they're thinking about them, continue to send those. I do appreciate those. I am reading those, and thank you for those.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Morgan. Anything else that you wanted to? All right. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Ms. Lebron.
Thank you, Dr. Morgan, for sharing this presentation, and thank you, Chief Stockdale. I think, as everyone mentioned, these are very difficult decisions, and, thank you for your transparency. I think your commitment to not cutting school budgets and holding the budget flat for this period of time, I think it makes sense. I really like how within the presentation you tied it to the core values and the strategic priorities, and I definitely seen equity and excellence and achievement really tied to some of the decisions. While still very difficult, I've seen those very present. So thank you for thinking of that, and also thank you for thinking of the alternative plans for families and the communities, and even in the communication plan, thinking about the employee assistance as some of these decisions are rolling out. So thank you.
Thank you. All right. Let me make sure I don't miss anyone else. Great. All right. This evening, we have 6 additional resolutions in the areas of finance, academics, and talent that will be presented to the board for discussion only. The board will be asked to consider the adoption of those resolutions at our February 27th board business meeting. Dr. Morgan, would you please present these remaining resolutions to the board?
Yes, the next resolution is a finance resolution. So 5.01, authorizing the acceptance of gifts and grants from Cleveland Guardians Charities, MAC Installations and Consulting, Martha Holden Jennings Foundation, and Meyer, and authorizing the CEO to spend the funds in accordance with the terms and conditions of the gifts and grants. From the Cleveland Guardians Charities, a grant in the amount of $200,000 to support the Cleveland Metropolitan School District's Senate baseball and softball programs for the 2024 season. From MAC Installations and Consulting, LLC, a gift in the amount of $5,000 to support the IT department's Adopt a School program. From the Martha Holden Jennings Foundation, a grant in the amount of $3,000 to develop the English curriculum My Perspectives at John Adams College and Career Academy. From Martha Holden Jennings Foundation, a grant in the amount of $20,000 to support the implementation of the Wave Maker program in 6 CMSD schools where students will gain knowledge about local and global water-related issues. From Meyer, a gift in the amount of $5,000 to support Project ACT in providing emergency food assistance to students experiencing homelessness.
Any discussion from the board? Okay.
The next resolution is an academic resolution. So 6.01, authorizing the purchase of 2 used vehicles from Cleveland Metropolitan School District authorized vendor for the use of the CTE program at Max Hayes High School for classroom use and teaching tools not to exceed in $50,000, $25,000 per vehicle. Max Hayes High School provides automotive services and training to students to utilize used vehicles. The existing vehicles are no longer appropriate due to age for the educational requirements for the program and need to be replaced with newer model years. Purchasing used vehicles has presented challenges with a few vendors responding to requests for quotes, and those that respond are unwilling to price protect for sufficient time to seek specific board approval. This resolution will allow Max Hayes to purchase 2 used vehicles at a price not to exceed $25,000 each for a total purchase price not to exceed $50,000. Prior to purchasing, Max Hayes will obtain at least 3 written quotes.
Is there any discussion from the board? Okay, thank you.
And then finally, our next resolutions are our routine talent resolutions. So
All right, so now they move down to just normal things for this meeting. $143 million, is what they need to clear. And it looks like they're going to be doing so with cuts to the central office, summer learning, out of school time, changing the school calendars to align, student technology, and then personnel potentially can make up the additional $41 million. This is a massive deal and something we are, of course, are going to be breaking down tonight on 19 News at 10 and 11. For now, I'm Jeff Slauson with 19 News. Have a great night. Much more to come, both on air and online.
19 News, now streaming